Hello, AP English Language and Composition students. I think we're on lesson 23, but anyway, the focus of the lesson is the analysis of the stylistic techniques in the passage about General George Armstrong Custer. In fact, it's titled that. This might be 2 videos long, but it should help you. So let's look at the techniques, the key ones. What I want you to notice is, what is the author's point? Where is the author's point? Well, he starts off with this idea. It's difficult. And then we see that this paragraph ends with, there is agreement on very little. You could say that his point is that it's difficult, but there is clarity later on, so you can't say that's his main point. But this idea does recur. Difficult, agreement on very little. Let's keep looking at these paragraphs. Oh, it's a little low. So I said already, difficult, and then agreement on very little at the beginning and end of the first paragraph. We have this word, hazy. And then on the second page, we have the idea that there is a question, and we have words like perhaps. And we have a lot of irony going on in the passage. So all that irony with those words conveys what idea? That perhaps this man's competency is in question. So when you read, try to find the patterns that are inherent, embedded in the piece of literature. Find the patterns. Find what recurs. There's evidence, there's more evidence, there's building evidence. It should become clearer as we get through. Now, one thing that I haven't talked about is that the main idea comes last. That format is called induction. If your main idea were first, it would be called, the format would be a deductive format. But we have an inductive format, building up to the main idea, which isn't as typical in prose writing that is nonfiction. Right? So we do have that going on. So we do get clarity at the end. It's a very clear statement. Well, let's go back up to some other techniques. We have, and some of you wrote this in your responses, to one group, to the other. There was a question about that. I forgot which student, maybe Dale or Aaron, I don't know, made the statement that this shows balance. Well, the question said it shows balance, but why? What's the purpose? To present himself, Andrist, who wrote this, as objective, not biased in his presentation of George Custer's character and competency. So we get that idea at first, and yet, very subtly hinted at, is that you should be developing a viewpoint that he is not competent. But he wants us to believe in him as a writer that is objective. We do have, although a good part of his bad record, that's a little confusing, just the wording, good part of his bad record. It's not that the writer doesn't know how to be clear. He purposefully wants to be a little bit confusing here, not to confuse you, but to mix the good and the bad. so that you can't just, it isn't so clear, whether he is competent or not, especially at this early stage of the argument. All right, so now let's put together another string of ideas that are in here. We're going to be focusing on key diction. So the third paragraph, this word, vivaciousness, and this word, flamboyant. Right. When we have words like that in the first lines of paragraphs, they do stand out. They're pretty elaborate words, pretty long, many syllables, and they are not typically attributed to males, especially this is a soldier, a leader of men. What does vivacious mean? It's usually used to describe a woman's sexuality and that her body is very good looking, but it's applied to him. Even though it's not talking about the body, but just his energy level and the charm, maybe. But nevertheless, it's a strange choice of words for a man. So we should be, there's a little bit of irony here. All right, so let's go down to the bottom paragraph on the first page. And we can look at the syntax. He designed his own uniform. He is the key part of the independent clause. And then we start a subordinate clause with the subject of the subordinate clause and the verb. Then it's all phrases, right? So we have a sentence that is 1, 2, 3, 4 full lines of type. Why so long? Don't just say it's for detail. But he's excessive. It's an excessively long sentence, which conveys that he's excessively focused on the way he looks. Excessive for a soldier who's supposed to have a uniform, which is uniform with the other people's outfits, but his is not. Okay? What does flamboyant suggest? Well, you might laugh. Our root is flame. Need I say any more? No, they're not saying he's gay, but he's very eccentric, at least. Right? So, we have golden hair grown long and lying in ringlets. Does that sound like your normal soldier of any age? So flamboyant and this, he's going outside of the bounds of what is acceptable in the way he dresses and looks. They're not saying he's anything, sexuality-wise off base, but all right, arabesque, that's a dance move or a position in ballet, I think. So, But anyway, the idea is catch the subtlety. He's going outside of the bounds of what is acceptable for males, especially soldiers. Now that comes into play in the next page. So let's look at that. During the war, so we do have a long sentence right here. It is over 6 lines long, about 6 lines long. Why so long? What's it about? It's about his going off track, like going on a little jag, like off of his main responsibility. So it's a digression. It's going out of the bounds again of what he should be doing. And so it's very long to emphasize that it's very wrong. Right? So the length of the sentence shows that the digression is extreme. Just like the length of the sentence in the preceding paragraph that ended the first page shows that he's very extreme and off base in the way he pays attention to his appearance. We do have, well, there are some new terms here, really. We have three what we call absolute phrases. They sort of look like participial phrases. Saber swinging is the first absolute phrase. Then yellow hair streaming in the wind is the second. And the field behind him thundering with hundreds of men and horses answering to his command is a third long absolute phrase. What is an absolute phrase? It's a phrase that is supposed to not just modify a little part of the sentence, but the whole sentence. And how they're normally formed is that they often have a participle in them, but this participle is not starting its own phrase, it's modifying a noun. Streaming is modifying hair, swinging saber, and thundering la 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 is modifying field. Answering to his command is modifying horses. So there are actually four absolute phrases. They're just modifying phrases. But it's the same idea as the other sentences. It shows his impulsiveness. It shows him going extremely, but this in the second sentence, he was leading a cavalry charge. It's very motion-oriented and very, it's a cumulative. It's extending on. It's extending out further and further with more and more phrases to show excessiveness again. That he isn't a good tactician. He just goes crazy, whooping it up going into battle. Right? So the four absolute phrases extending after the independent clause show that he's it's a long flow after the main independent clause to show that he's emotionally extreme here, very much getting into the situation. We're probably running out of time for this first video. We have a little more time, so I'm going to keep going to the last sentence, the last paragraph. Again, as I said before, it's the inductive clear point made at the end. But what do we have as a technique here? Who had retained the enthusiasm of a youth at the cost of never quite attaining the judgment of a man. Enthusiasm of a youth and judgment of a man. Very opposite. What do we call that type of technique? Antithesis. They don't have to be parallel in parallel fashion like this, but they are in a parallel sort of construction, right? We have the prepositional phrases after the modifying the nouns. So, again, it seems it is balanced in a way that is constructed, but now we have clarity on the point of the essay. Yeah, he had this, but he lacked this, and this outweighed any good that he had, and if that's good at all. So it's overall a negative point about Custer. Now, we do know, too, that he did lose the Battle of the Little Bighorn. 700 men brought into battle, led into battle by him, and over 250 dying, including about 4 or 5 other members of his own family. So we can see that just the facts of history support this judgment here too, right? But in any case, I think that's enough explanation of the techniques, so that should help you on your assignment.